We place an immense trust in the hands of those who wear the badge. It is a sacred and heavy responsibility. We grant them the power to detain, to use force, to take away liberty, all in the name of order and justice. This power is given with the implicit promise that it will be wielded with care, with precision, with an unwavering commitment to the truth. The police are meant to be our protectors, the thin blue line separating a civil society from chaos. They are the ones we call in our moments of greatest fear and vulnerability, expecting competence and compassion in return for the authority we have loaned them. This social contract is the very bedrock of a free society. But what happens when that trust is broken? What happens when the shield that is meant to protect us is turned against the innocent? The system, designed to find the guilty and exonerate the blameless, can sometimes become a relentless machine of injustice. A single mistake, a rushed judgment, a moment of confirmation bias can set in motion a devastating chain of events. In 1984 in Winston-Salem, North Carolina, a young newspaper editor named Deborah Sykes was brutally raped and murdered. The city was gripped by fear and demanded justice. Police were under immense pressure to find her killer. Their investigation quickly focused on a 19-year-old black man named Daryl Hunt. There was no physical evidence tying him to the crime, but he fit a vague description. Hunt insisted he was innocent. He had a solid alibi, but the machinery of justice had already begun to grind forward. It had chosen its target. The system wanted a conviction, so facts were made to fit the theory. The case rested on shaky, unreliable testimony. Witnesses were coerced. One key witness later recanted and was a known informant with a history of instability. Another claimed to identify Hunt from a significant distance at night. The prosecution's narrative played on racial fears and public outrage. Despite flimsy evidence and his pleas of innocence, Daryl Hunt was convicted and sentenced to life. For 19 years he fought for freedom from behind bars. His youth was stolen by a justice system that refused to admit its mistake. Year after year, Hunt and his legal team filed appeals. They fought for DNA testing as technology improved. Finally, in 2003, a DNA profile was run through a national database. It produced a match. The DNA belonged to Willard Brown, who confessed to the murder. After 19 years, Daryl Hunt was exonerated and set free. But freedom could not return what was lost. On December 26, 2006, Phoenix police responded to a wellness check at the apartment Ryan Waller, Heather Kwan. When they arrived, they found Heather deceased on the couch. Ryan was sitting in a chair nearby, dazed and injured. He had been shot in the face, the bullet entering through his eye socket and lodging in his brain. Instead of seeing a victim of a violent home invasion, the lead detective, Detective Paul Dalton, saw a suspect. He immediately assumed Ryan had murdered his girlfriend and then attempted to take his own life. This initial baseless assumption would seal Ryan's fate. Despite his obvious and severe injuries, a swollen eye, clear signs of trauma, Ryan was treated not as a victim, but as a killer. He was taken to an interrogation room, not an emergency room. For hours, Detective Dalton questioned him relentlessly. Ryan, suffering from a catastrophic brain injury, was confused and disoriented. His answers were disjointed and nonsensical. The detective interpreted this confusion not as a symptom of a gunshot wound to the head, but as deception. He accused Ryan of lying, mocking his injuries and ignoring his pleas for medical attention. The entire agonizing interrogation was recorded. For nearly 4 hours, a man with a bullet in his brain was denied medical care. It was only after the interrogation yielded nothing that Ryan was finally taken to a hospital. Doctors were horrified. They discovered he had been shot, losing an eye and suffering permanent brain damage. He would also develop seizures as a result of the delayed treatment. In September 2000, David Cam, a former Indiana State Trooper, came home to a scene of unimaginable horror. He found his wife Kim and his 2 young children, Brad and Jill, shot to death in their garage. His life was shattered in an instant. When police arrived, they found a grieving husband and father, but very quickly, their focus shifted. Instead of launching a wide-ranging investigation into a brutal triple homicide, they zeroed in on the man who had lost everything. They decided David Cam was their killer. From that moment on, every piece of evidence was viewed through the lens of his guilt. The prosecution's theory was built on questionable forensic evidence. A forensic analyst claimed that microscopic bloodstains on Cam's shirt were high-velocity impact spatter, meaning he must have been present when his family was shot. This became the cornerstone of the state's case. Cam insisted he was innocent, that he had been playing basketball miles away at the time of the murders. He had multiple witnesses to support his alibi, but the power of the scientific-sounding testimony swayed the jury. In 2002, David Cam was convicted of murdering his family and sentenced to prison. For years, Cam fought from his prison cell. His conviction was overturned on appeal, but the state, convinced of his guilt, tried him again. However, new evidence began to emerge that pointed to a different suspect. DNA found on a sweatshirt at the scene belonged to a known felon named Charles Boney. Boney's palm print was also found on the family's truck. The defense argued that Boney was the real killer, but the prosecution clung to its theory. Finally, after 13 years and 3 separate trials, the truth prevailed. In his third trial, in 2013, David Cam was acquitted of all charges. The jury concluded that Charles Boney had acted alone. The devastating failures are not born from a single source. Daryl Hunt, Ryan Waller, David Cam. These failures arise from systemic pressures, human biases, procedural flaws, that can turn the pursuit of justice into a factory for wrongful convictions. One of the most common and powerful factors is tunnel vision, confirmation bias. Once investigators lock onto a suspect, they interpret all subsequent information to confirm their theory. Evidence that points to the suspect's guilt is amplified, while evidence that suggests innocence is dismissed, ignored, or explained away. Rushed investigations, shortcuts, and a culture that prioritizes closing a case over finding the truth create a powerful and dangerous trap. The goal shifts from truth to finality, and the system resists admitting it was wrong. The consequences of a wrongful conviction extend far beyond the prison walls. They represent the complete demolition of a human life. The first and most obvious cost is the theft of time. Years, sometimes even decades, are stolen from an innocent person. Their years filled with the horrors of prison life, violence, isolation, deep despair. An innocent person's life can be shattered. Their freedom, their reputation, their family, their future can all be stolen in an instant. The consequences ripple outward, eroding not just one life, but the public's faith in the entire system of justice. They exhaust life savings on legal fees, live in suspended animation, and families become secondary victims, emotional and financial well-being destroyed. Even upon exoneration, re-entry into society is a monumental challenge. The person who emerges is not the same who went in, a ghost of their former self piecing together fragments of a stolen life. Freedom, when it finally comes, is often bittersweet, forever tinged by what was lost. It is crucial to state a fundamental truth that can sometimes get lost in these painful stories. The vast majority of police officers are dedicated public servants who strive to do their job with honor and integrity. They are men and women who willingly face danger to protect their communities. To paint the entire profession with the broad brush of these catastrophic failures would be a grave injustice. The problem is not necessarily a plague of bad apples. The real issue is the existence of bad systems. A good person can make terrible mistakes when they are working within a flawed system. It promotes tunnel vision, it rushes investigations, and it lacks robust oversight. This is why focusing solely on punishing individual officers is often insufficient. While accountability for misconduct is essential, it does not fix the underlying problems that allowed the misconduct to occur in the first place. If training is inadequate, forensic standards weak, and a culture prioritizes closing cases over getting them right, removing one officer will not solve the problem. The system itself must be reformed, not just punished. We can and should support the good work police do while demanding reforms that prevent future tragedies. To prevent future tragedies, we must build a system that is fundamentally more accountable. Accountability is not about retribution. It's about catching errors before they escalate into irreversible injustices. A critical first step is the mandatory recording of all custodial interrogations. Recording protects suspects from coercion and officers from false accusations, an objective witness when words are disputed, improved eyewitness procedures, double-blind sequential presentation, reduce mistaken IDs. Simple, science-backed changes that can prevent the kind of flawed identifications that helped convict Daryl Hunt. Strengthening the gatekeeping function for forensic evidence is also paramount. Courts must be rigorous in scrutinizing scientific validity before evidence reaches a jury. Forensic analysis should be impartial science, not a tool to bolster a prosecutor's case. We need robust independent mechanisms to investigate police misconduct. Civilian oversight with subpoena power. Dismantling legal barriers that keep new evidence out of court is essential to correct past wrongs. Civil society must demand these changes. Reform and oversight are a shared responsibility. The stories of wrongful conviction are honestly pretty bleak. But despair is a luxury we cannot afford. These tragedies must serve as a catalyst for change. Recorded interrogations, better forensic standards, independent oversight, these are practical steps that protect citizens and empower good officers. The bridge of trust has been damaged, but it is not beyond repair. With courage, commitment, and a shared belief in justice for all, we can rebuild it stronger than before.